Mark Twain once said, "Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect."
Yeah, good quote. I like that quote. I was just saying before we press record, I'm not quite sure why it ended up in this spot in the book. However, I love this little opening to the first part of the book. It might be like my favorite set of 2 pages in the book. But I think that typical thinking and instruction in the bagpipe world is finite, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you play in the band, I'm using my cheat sheet here, otherwise known as the book.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
like, so
technically you wrote it. I think that's probably acceptable, right?
yeah. But so when you join a band, it's like, hey, you got to learn these marches. Then we give you a kilt, and then cool, there you go.
Yeah.
You're a band member, right? Maybe a single jig that you're going to play in competition. Okay, and in the process, you can miss the most important part of this, which is that we're failing to learn the instrument properly as a tool that you can use in any situation that you want.
Right.
And so, like, I think this little opening part focuses on an interesting idea, something that I like, an interesting thought experiment, which is that the bagpipe is a piece of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a really interesting idea to me. And it takes me in all sorts of interesting directions that helps me approach everything I do on a day-to-day basis. So, like, first of all, like, how is a bagpipe a technology? Well, first of all, as a musical instrument, it represents a sort of quantum leap in just general making of musical instruments. Like, thousands of years ago, this huge quantum leap was made, which is if I connect my reed to a reservoir, I can play continuously.
Never
instead
has to
of
stop.
instead of having to stop all the time.
Yeah.
Which is a huge, like, that represents a huge quantum leap forward, certainly for wind instruments. And it's not to say, obviously not every wind instrument is sold on that, right? Like, people still like the trumpet's still pretty cool, despite not having a reservoir. But, it's very kind of interesting and obviously very practical because that idea lasted thousands and thousands of years. So even as just a musical instrument, it's like a pretty advanced technology. But it's also a technology in the sense that any musical instrument is a technology. It's a way to sort of express yourself in a way that people still can't figure out why it's so awesome.
Right.
Like, people still don't know why music is so incredible. And they can't figure out if it's an art or a science or a philosophy or a language, or like they throw all this stuff around and, like, music is a language. I don't know, I guess.
None
like,
of these theories seem to quite get it all right. Like, maybe they're getting
Like,
pieces of it, but
if music is a language, then why do I suck at speaking French? As an accomplished musician, that would suggest that I would have been good at French, but I'm not. So, like, maybe it is partially language, and obviously there's lots of things that are very similar to language, but it's not just that. It's like almost like I don't know. Is it like this amazing, all-encompassing art form that just combines all? Because obviously there's philosophy involved and there's lots of science involved, and I don't know. It's very fascinating. But anyway,
I think,
let's not get too lost.
Hey,
but yeah, go ahead.
If you want, hold on to that piece. Interjection. I think it was Darwin himself who tried to theorize, like, why did we develop music? And one idea was as a way to attract mates, which always makes me chuckle because you could insert joke about bagpipers attracting mates, like, if that was the reason, we might be more successful.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Yeah. Maybe there is some sort of, like, existential, evolutionary reason why we do all these things. I think it's probably likely.
I think that my mate, maybe like most people's mates, tolerates the bagpipes. It's not like a thing that attracted her to me. So
yeah. Well, but maybe if, okay, and then just throwing it out there, just get a little goofy. Mm-hmm. Maybe if your spouse only tolerates the bagpipes at best, maybe that means definitively. how you're approaching playing the bagpipes is not right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you need to fix it.
That's a great
Maybe
point.
maybe that's a great warning sign.
Yeah.
I understand the feeling though. I
Yeah.
understand the feeling.
Well, I mostly
My
wanted
wife-
to find
my
some way
wife's
to get a
slightly
joke
more
in there.
than-
So
Yeah, my wife slightly beyond tolerates it. Like, I think she embraces it overall because, it's how I put my portion of the food on the table.
yeah.
So,
yeah. There's that.
So, it's kind of interesting. By the way, I'm not encouraging anyone else to get into the bagpipe teaching market. Just you find where you are, No, okay, just kidding. Okay, so anyway, bagpipe as a technology.
Yeah.
And then, so it is a technology. It's like this cool tool that we can use to express ourselves. But then I love just thinking about these things. Okay, if the bagpipe is a technology, let's compare it to other technologies.
Yeah.
Right. And in here we talk about the telephone being an
Right.
incredible technology, right? Because you can call your when school's out and you're at home, you can call your boyfriend or girlfriend and you can continue to talk to them all night long, even though you're
Probably
not in the same
about the
physical
fact that you
location.
play bagpipes because they find that so attractive.
Possibly, let's not
Yeah.
rule that out.
Yeah.
But that's not the power of the telephone, right? So even though that's a really cool application of the telephone, maybe it's the reason we got involved in the telephone in the first place. But then what the telephone represents is that suddenly you used to have to be in the same location as someone to communicate clearly with them. And then we developed, the postal system. Now you could send letters back and forth and whatever, I suppose, right? That's a huge technology, and that represents being able to contact anyone in the world. However, it's quite slow. And then the telephone allows you to have, for all intents and purposes, a real-time conversation with someone anywhere in the world. And that's an incredible technology with an infinite number of applications. I think that's a key, element of any technology. You wouldn't call something a technology unless it had many, 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 many applications.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. And I feel like maybe there's something there too that's perhaps hard to put your finger on, but there's something almost ethereal, some might even say spiritual, where like the underlying reason this technology was developed was to be social with other humans, right? And like, so is there an underlying reason why the bagpipe or the fiddle or any other instrument was developed? So like underlying reason is there's something about music expression. Here's one of the many tools you can choose from, but also that tool can be applied in a lot of different situations. Like we've talked about before,
course,
it's not just competition. It's not just parades. There's a lot of different ways to use it.
It's not only that it can be applied, but I think that our attitude as pipers needs to be that it must be applied, right? So we don't, and again, I talk about that here. Like a lot of pipers learn the bagpipes because they want to play Amazing Grace. Not everybody, but a lot of pipers. They're like, man, I just really want to play Amazing Grace. Because I love Amazing Grace.
Would you call
And that's
that
why I wanna learn the
one
pipes.
application of the tool then?
Yeah,
was
that's a great
playing Amazing
reason.
Grace?
It's a great like Gandalfian nudge out the door. See what I did there? Little
Yeah,
Lord of the Rings.
I like that.
Little throwback there. It's a great nudge out of the door. It gets you in motion. Okay, but then but it can't stop there. Okay, and then it's the same reason. Like, why do I like to play chess? Well, because I like to compete against my brother and beat him most of the time. Now that he can beat me most of the time. Right, I don't want to play chess.
I don't
that
play
much
chess
anymore.
so much, yeah.
Yeah, but if I did want to continue to compete with him, right, I would have to learn the skills and the fundamentals and the techniques and everything in order to become, a chess player that was able to express my creativity in a way that was competitive, and so on, right? Like, so it all points in that direction of, you need to be able to play the infinite game with your piece of technology. The iPhone is like maybe the most amazing example of technology in the history of mankind. It's pretty close. There's a lot of, as far as technology that we can hold and feel and buy.
Yeah.
Like the iPhone is just incredible.
It's there
but
in
it's
our
not
daily
because
life and stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's not because of the text message app, and it's not because of the meme generator app, and it's not because of Snapchat and Instagram. It's not because of any of those individual things. It's because in the palm of your hand, you have infinite possibility.
I wonder if this anecdote would feels applicable to you, Andrew. For a couple of years, I worked in a technology store, retail, and there was
Condolences.
Yeah. Oh man, it was. I'm never going back. But I was there for several years, and there was a local prominent individual who was very rich. Everybody knew about him, and very old. And he and I established a relationship. Basically, he would just show up every time he needed anything paired via Bluetooth. And so,
yeah.
I was fine because he'd buy stuff sometimes. But he brought in an iPad, and he said, and this was early days of iPads, and he said how incredible it was, how much he loved it, how amazing it was. And he showed me what he could do with it. And you know what he could do with it? Take notes with the stock note app that came with it.
Yes.
And I said, that's
exactly.
great. Did you know that there are other apps? He looked at me blank face, right? So to me, this feels like that he wanted to learn Amazing Grace, and he was so crazy about Amazing Grace, and good for him. That is great, right? But he was living under his privilege, like that tool could have done so much more for him. There are other applications, right? Apps, huh?
I mean, it's like it's cool that the story includes that the guy was really rich, because that single device will make millions rich, maybe billions. Yeah, just because it's such a great advice. There's people doing incredible art and animation, and there's just people that are just hustling out there on Instagram, in the grams, just making connections and networking and like it's amazing.
Yeah.
That
tool is being applied by a lot of people in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Which is part of what makes it a good next book. Part of what makes it a good technology, though, right? Is that it can be applied in a lot of different situations by different people.
Yes.
It's like, what's your vision? It helps you realize your vision. That's the idea, right? What's your goal? It gets you to your goal more efficiently, etc.
And then just to talk a little bit about bagpiping vision, right? So I remember just like kind of fantasizing that one day I would be able to perform with the Syracuse Kilties pipe band. Because when I first learned the bagpipes, my dad played with the Syracuse Kilties, and like that's what I knew and kind of what I was kind of excited about. And the idea that I might play with the Syracuse Kilties was like so exciting. I was so stoked to be like playing the bagpipes. Now it never actually worked. We ended up playing with a different local band, not the Syracuse Kilties, but like I achieved that goal, and usually kind of shortly before you're about to achieve a goal, usually your mind has already shifted to some other goal beyond that.
Yeah,
I've found
it's part of the hedonic treadmill. You hop to the next unattainable thing.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Hedonic, yes, but also just kind of. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative. I think it can be a positive.
Yeah,
so
true. Yeah.
So it's like, oh, you should, and then now it's like, oh, maybe I'll try solo competing, and then even before that's over, it's like, oh, maybe grade 3 next, maybe grade 2 next. Oh, maybe I'm going to play in the higher level band. It's like, oh, maybe I can teach my computer to like jam along with me as I play bagpipes. But you keep kind of like your horizons keep expanding. It's a lot like when a kid learns to walk too, right? Like at first, that kid's so stoked to be able to walk. But then you start to realize, now that you have that skill in place, you start to realize what other possibilities exist as a result of that.
Right. There's a stacking thing where the one skill opens up more doors.
Right. And it's the same with your guy with the iPad, right? It's like he just fell in love with the Notes app, but then it's like, did you know there's other apps? And then, maybe he's got the Photos app, and then, before long you might have an online website that you built on your iPad where you teach people, how to do something interesting.
So Amazing Grace on Highland bagpipes might be what gets you in and gets you started, but that might turn into parades and competition. It might turn into small pipes and border pipes and Northumbrian pipes, and it might turn into just all kinds of stuff.
Let's not get too crazy.
That's far enough, right? Rein it back in.
I think, and then I think on a more molecular level, right? It's like, Amazing Grace. Oh, cool. There's like these things. I need these things called grace notes to play Amazing Grace. And so you do that, and then you're like, oh wait, what else could I do with these grace notes? And then you hear a guy playing a jig, and it's like, oh, like the jig is really just the same ingredients, just organized in a different way. But then it's like, oh, the jig definitely has a lot more rhythm and rhythmic groove into it. And I've spent some time kind of thinking about what that means. It's like, cool. What other cool rhythmical bagpipe tunes are there? Right. And so you start to branch out. Right. And then it's like, oh man, it's like, all I have to do is learn a Strathspey, and I basically know all the tunes I need to know to join the local band. Cool. And then it's like, all right, what else can bands do? What other kind of tunes can we play? Like, what are these? Like what happens if we purposefully don't play all the same notes at the same time and we write a little bit of harmony, and then you learn a little bit about chord progressions, and you're like, man, what else can chord progressions do? Oh, it turns out if you can speak chord progressions, you can play with guitarists and bass guitarists, and like, cool, like what else can that do? It's like, oh, if I can write it down, I can write like giant bagpipe symphonies, and before you know it, you're going you're going onward and onward to all these kind of interesting things, and that's the big idea.
Yeah.
Like infinite possibility. Or maybe you go in a totally different direction, and it's like, oh, cool, what other kind of bagpipes are there?
Right, yeah.
Oh, bellows pipes, cool. Oh, what other kinds of bagpipes can you play with bellows? Oh, Ilian pipes, totally different finger work. But like, interesting. And like, what happens if I combine my bagpiping and my Ilian piping into like the same garage band track? Cool. Like, what happens if I throw a little beat behind that? Oh, interesting. That's kind of neat. It's like, what happens if I take the beat back out and instead I ask my drummer buddy to come in and just play along with this? It's like, cool. Suddenly you have like the next hot, Celtic
fusion
festival band.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, why not?
I've been reading the Narnia books with my kids since they were like, every time some of them get older. And have you read those by chance? Do you remember
I mean, yes. So I've read them and I've seen all the movies. Like I'm pretty intimate with the storyline, but I'm not like a scholar.
The way it all ends is
it's not like Little House on the Prairie that I've read 1,000 times.
Another excellent series for sure. But this just brings into my mind the vision of the way that it all ends after the final battle, when it's like they're in Narnia, but they realize that as they look like beyond the horizon, it's the same Narnia again, but bigger, brighter, and better. And they look beyond that horizon, and it's bigger, brighter, better. And I think it's Reepicheep who keeps yelling onward and upward. And it's like you get the idea that no matter how far you go, bigger and better vistas will open up and more opportunity. And the thing is, it's all Narnia, right? So it's like, it's all bagpipes, sure. But it's not all. It's bigger and better and realer and more exhilarating and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to school and learned music composition and electroacoustic music, but that was all. My bagpiping experience was all a stepping stone into that. Right. So I learned how to compose music for cello and piano and xylophone, and then I integrated like Max MSP, like quasi artificially intelligent computers, like making musical decisions based on inputs. And like, we did all that stuff. And it was all just an extension of my previous musical experiences. I also played the drums. So right about the age that I started playing the pipes, I also played percussion in the school band. And those two things, like what I learned drumming and what I learned piping, they intermingled with each other all the time. And they sparked a ton of creativity. And like, just like any other technology, right? The ways you can combine them together are infinite. And so you can pursue whatever interests you. And I think that you'll have a lot of success and generate a lot of interest. Yeah.
Did you ever play a drum kit, like rock and roll drum kit kind of thing? Dude, I wish
I played the drums in the school's production of Godspell. I was like the only student musician in the pit band.
Sick.
And the rest, I got to like jam with professionals.
That's awesome.
I'm not sure they were stoked, but my
so
music
much,
teacher, Mr. Clements, he was super. He played the keyboards in the Godspell band. He played the keyboards, and then there were 1 or 2 or 3 other professionals. But then he was like, "Hey, I'd really like you to play the drums for this, like if you're interested." And it was so cool. I mean, I kind of sucked at first, and then like they kind of taught me how to rein in a few things and how to play like a real pit drummer a little bit. And kind of gave me some anecdotes, and it was super fun. Yeah.
Next project I hope you'll do, Andrew, is to bring the worlds of CrossFit and drum kit together, because I would love an excuse to
Crosskit.
Yeah, dude, Crosskit, that'd be sick, man. I would love to learn drumming and get better with rhythm and stuff like that, but like I don't have time for like everything. So it's like if there's an excuse that it's like, oh, this is how I stay healthy, then I can make an excuse for it.
I see. I don't know how many healthy rock and roll drummers you've seen.
I want the physique of a rock and roll drummer. That's exactly what I'm going for. Yeah.
Yeah. Something I highly recommend is Dance Dance Revolution or those Rock Band games.
Oh yeah.
Like for anybody who's wants to get better at playing music or playing the bagpipes, like get those games and play them with your kids. But like it'll make you such a better musician. It's all about timing.
Yeah,
it's all about listening
all about
to
rhythm.
the music.
That's true. It's like
they're incredible games.
So great excuse
recommend.
for all of us to go out and get systems and games now. Like, hey,
Yes.
this is for my bagpiping. This is bagpipe time.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife was like, my wife will not allow gaming systems in the house, but like, it's so bad. I kind of agree with her. Mm-hmm. It's like, I love playing video games, but probably too much. Like I probably would just end up a lost soul, just like with tons of like potato chip crumbs just on me and just like never do anything except for play games.
When I was a kid, my parents' deal was that they wouldn't buy me any kind of gaming system, but they would buy me any instrument I wanted to play. So that's and here I am today.
And here you are now. Yeah, exactly. And meanwhile, all the video gaming kids are like multimillionaires.
Right, exactly. I mean, I say here I am today
on Twitch
entirely jokingly, right? I'm not. It's like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
you.
being serious about like here I am today, right? Yeah, that's the joke. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the reasons we built the dojo is because I really didn't want. I really personally didn't want to be a standard bagpipe instructor where all your evenings you're teaching and all your weekends you're away teaching. Like I really didn't want that. I knew I really didn't want a normal job, but I also really didn't want that. And nothing against those who do that and enjoy it, but just for me it was like, ooh, that's not going to quite work. I need my evenings and I need my rest. I need my beauty sleep and I need my rest. And so I had to innovate different ways to do it. And we talked about that, I think, in a recent podcast where, I just kind of had to we gradually innovated, things to do that were slightly different.
Yep.
And so not dissimilar from some of the piping trajectories we're talking about, where it's like, oh, maybe I can try this. Oh, maybe I can try this. And eventually, so the Piper's Dojo business has sort of, business, I suppose, as itself is kind of a technology that has an infinite number of possible directions that you can take it.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really what we've ended up doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
never thought I'd write a book.
Oh,
but that happened.
Yeah. I'd imagine that, for a lot of us, we can maybe look at other pipers and feel like we see a snapshot of where they are today and see the disparity between where they are today and where we are today. Maybe in a similar way that, somebody starting a new business can look at the established situation that Piper's Dojo is in. You've got systems in place, you've got employees, et cetera, and comparing that to how they're getting started today, right? It feels like a massive disparity. And so maybe a part of the goal of the book, you tell me, is realizing that I don't know. I feel like part of it is to find joy in the process, right? Come back here and here are some things to work on, and it will, it's you don't want to say you're going to turn into Fred Morrison, because that's could be an unhealthy comparison, right?
And as a matter of fact, I can promise you that if you're successful, you'll be nothing like Fred. Right? If you end up like Fred, that means you failed.
Because you're just trying to be Fred, right? Instead of be who you are.
That's replication's not useless, right? When I first learned to play the bagpipes, for the most part, I was just replicating the stuff my dad was showing me. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
But
it's a way to get started.
But mimicry will never be the end goal. And if it is, to quote Mark Twain, maybe you should pause and reflect, right? If all you're trying to do is mimic what other pipers around you are doing, yikes! It's not, this is not. It's not really going to be a long-term thing. I can promise you. Right? This is if I just do CrossFit because I want abs, that's a problem too, right? That's not really it. Abs will be a nice byproduct.
I was going to say, if you ended up with abs, who's going to complain,
hopefully.
Right? That's fine, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm still kind of trying to work on that. But I digress. What were we talking about?
Most people develop abs in their late 50s, so I wouldn't sweat about it. That's when it happens for most of us.
Yeah, so if you're successful as a bagpiper, you'll sound nothing like Fred Morrison or Jack Lee. Like Jack was a big influence of me. I think I see like in the way I perform, like I think I see similarities in myself, like obvious influences.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? It's like, who are the Beatles influenced by, or who is Pearl Jam influenced by? And I think you'll see influences, but I think the reason that you might recognize the name Beatles or you might recognize the name Pearl Jam is that, man, like they developed their own thing.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And they became unique in what they brought to the world and how they express themselves. Like who really cares about the Pink Floyd cover bands? Right? Like, why do you go see a Pink Floyd cover band?
Because you love Pink Floyd.
Because you love Pink Floyd.
Yeah, not because you love the cover band. Yep. Yep.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, maybe that's not true. Like maybe there's an art. Maybe there's an art of being a cover band, and I have no real experience. I've never seen a Pink Floyd cover band.
I sure have. But so like, you picked a good one. I can speak to it. Yeah.
Right. So like, there's nothing particularly remarkable except for the fact that they're just copying Pink Floyd.
It depends on the cover band, of course. You know, if you love Pink Floyd so much, which like my family's a pretty serious Pink Floyd family, then any iteration of Pink Floyd will have at least some value, you know. And sometimes the cover bands have like gimmick things, right? There's Australian Floyd, and they work didgeridoo in to set the controls for the Heart of the Sun and stuff like that. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But really, it's because Pink Floyd isn't touring and they're not in my town. So I'll take what I can get. That's what it comes down to, really, right?
Yeah, exactly. But there you go. I think there's a lot of bagpipe cover band style, things in the bagpipe world, right?
Yeah.
It's like, we're just trying to, Field Marshal plays whatever chanters, so that's what we play.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So much
and
of that,
and mimicry might not be the worst thing. It's definitely like it can be a great way to get jump started.
Yeah, it can be a way to learn things or try new stuff for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like everybody plays Steam Train to Maleg. Okay, so does that mean you shouldn't do that? No, it doesn't mean that. Steam Train to Maleg's awesome, but I think in the future, maybe you could write your own material that has a similar effect, and maybe it could be influenced by Steam Train. But I think what's going to make bagpiping special is people using it as a technology to really express themselves. That's sort of like the underlying thesis of it all for me.
Totally makes sense. Mimicry's fine. Don't stop there, though. Go on from there, right?
Yeah. What's the difference between Willie McCallum and Roddy McLeod? Right? Well, it's like, okay, in some respects, they're kind of exactly the same, right? Like they both won a ton of Glenfiddichs and they've won all the big prizes. But like, and they both sound amazing when they play, and they both play exactly the same style of music. Okay. All right. But like, how about all the interesting differences, right? The way Willie gets his sound is totally different. The way Roddy gets his sound is totally different. Probably the internal motivations as to why they want to practice so hard, to play that specific style of music. And there might be similarities, but I bet you it's all kind of like unique. And you don't get to that point without, really putting yourself into the music and your own interests. So like even in something where it'd be tempting to criticize it as being a non-creative pursuit, like the Glenfiddich is like double MSR and then P-Rock. In order to win, you're going to play in a way that the judge likes. So it'd be tempting to say, that's like sort of an anti-creative pursuit. And it's a worthwhile thought experiment, but at the end of the day, that's part of the way that those guys choose to express themselves so successfully and interestingly. Right? And it's really cool. And the same with the pipe bands. Pipe bands, it's like, everybody's boxed into the same music and they have to play it over and over again. Yeah, but also there's so much room for creativity and ingenuity. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that like J.D. Ingram recently put very, very beautifully, better than I could, how the restrictions are sometimes fuel for creativity in an interesting way.
Absolutely.
And it also strikes me like
there can be no creativity without restriction.
Yeah, there's got to be at least some restrictions there, right? You got to have some walls to
like
bounce
think about
against.
Think about it. It's like, think about it. Even just to live, there's always at least one huge restriction.
Yeah. Yeah.
which is that you're going to die pretty soon.
Yeah.
Relative to the age of the universe, you're going to die in a blink of an eye, right? So just living, you live with huge constrictions. Oh, and by the way, you have to breathe. Can't breathe underwater.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to have shelter. So there's all these restrictions, and then creativity is born out of the different combinations of possibilities offered to you based on what the restrictions are. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a lovely thought.
Like the instrument itself has 9 notes, right? It's this massive restriction that we talk about all the time, and yet that's kind of part of why it's awesome.
It's also why the RSPBA doesn't need to change the medley format. It's like the medley is a beautiful thing because of the restrictions. It makes it a huge challenge. If you just get rid of those restrictions, at least for a long time, medleys are going to be pretty crappy relative to what they are now, because you're going to have to learn to manage all the new possibilities.
Yeah.
Now, like, should there be a new event that's different from the MSR and the medley that gets added in? Like, cool. I'm totally up for that. But the restrictions are what makes it great. How do you take an M, an S, and an R and make it truly your own and truly special? That's some of the subtle beauties of the solo competition bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can listen to my 2006 album Expression as to, what happens when the possibilities are endless. It's like, it might be a little bit too out there.
A little too much.
It could be a little too much.
I'm hoping that you won't want to stop being my friend based on the fact that I'm now Googling your 2006 album Expression.
Yeah. You can do it. It's fine. I'm proud of it. It represents a moment.
I just mean in case there was any expectation that I'd already a devoted fan of the album.
Oh no, there's zero expectation.